Hello, Joella. What's your question for us?
I wanted to ask Scott about the question for the calling Catholics to be Bible Christians and vice versa. In the, I think it was the last tape, he talked about praying the Mass and invoking the Lord's power in our lives. And he said that, I just would like him to expound on this a little bit, that God would move in history and move in our lives when we lived and prayed the Mass the way it really should be prayed and attended. And it was something, when I heard it, I was so overwhelmed because it really touched me. And I'd surely like to know if Scott could go a little further on that.
Sure. Yes, thank you for your question.
Oh, Joellen, don't get me started.
We'll be here until Tuesday.
Well, I would say this in a nutshell, if I can compress this. Reading the book of Revelation has been a pastime for me for more than 2 decades. And I've moved through every interpretive position out there. But the one thing that has made the most sense out of it is to notice that every single time a judgment of God is announced in the apocalypse, it's always in response to a song or to a prayer or to some liturgical activity that takes place in one of the 2 halves of the apocalypse. The first half, you've got the Lamb breaking open the seals and revealing the contents of this book, the book of life, the sealed book. The second half of the apocalypse climaxes in the marriage supper of the Lamb. Well, you read the early church fathers, and they saw this 2-part movement as reflecting the Mass, the liturgy of the Word and the liturgy of the Eucharist. And the more you look into the apocalypse, everything that happens, you have amens, you have alleluias, you've got worthy is the Lamb, you've got the holy, 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 you've got Lamb of God, Agnus Dei, you've got incense, you've got priests dressed in linen, you've got prayers and songs and antiphons, you've got music being sung and celebrated. And if you take this to a Catholic and say, what do you identify this with? They'll say the Mass. Now, even Catholics who don't read the book of Revelation, and I would say most Catholics avoid it, unfortunately, but it was in studying the book of Revelation that I realized this is a depiction of how in the Mass we participate in the worship of the heavenly Jerusalem. All the angels and saints gathered around the throne of the Lamb, Jesus Christ, who is the King of Kings, give us our compass bearings so that when we are in the Mass, we read the book of Revelation and we realize this is the activity that releases the power of God. If that's the case, if all of God's judgments, all of His deliverances are in response to the songs and the prayers offered in union with the Lamb's self-offering, then we ought to be inserting ourselves into the Mass as intelligently and as deliberately and as fervently as possible.
What's the old phrase, I think it was reminded last week in the program, that in the Mass we serve with the priest. What's the old way of saying
yes,
that?
we serve with the priest, exactly.
That's right. We are taking part.
Yeah, we're not spectators.
Yes.
We are co-offering this in union with the priest. We serve at the altar of the Lamb. Oh, we could release so much spiritual power for our families and our society if we did that.